sun, wind, and wires. The first edition of StromNetzFluss was made possible by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action of Germany and Windnode, a collaborative project that ran from 2017 until 2021, in which over 70 partners worked on model solutions for a 100% renewable, intelligent energy system of the future. And now the second revised edition came into life through the initiative of RGI, the Renewables Grid Initiative, a unique collaboration of NGOs and TSOs from across Europe, and of course through the support of 50 Hertz, one of the 4 transmission system operators for electricity in Germany. It's now my pleasure to introduce our digital panelists of authors. They all were instrumental in the creation of both the content and the design of the book and can tell us more about the vision behind this project. So first, Victoria Vogt worked as a research associate in the Energy Law Department at the Institute for Climate Protection, Energy and Mobility, in short ICEM, where she specialized in legal issues related to the energy transition, sector coupling, and offshore energy. And most recently, she joined our friends at Enatrag. Stefanie Bethje is a program manager at the Renewables Grid Initiative, where she oversees communications and events-related activities and is heavily involved in policy work and in efforts to encourage public participation in electricity grids. Then we move on. Markus Grebig works in corporate development at 50 Hertz and was previously the project director of the Windnode project. He was also the main driving force behind this book and assembled our amazing team of authors. Then we have Professor Dr. Ingo Uhlig. He conducts research at the University of Halle and the Institute for Climate Protection, Energy and Mobility in Berlin. He explores the cultural and narrative dimensions of the energy transition, which is why he is somehow the literature driving force behind this book. And last but not least, my colleague Andreas Lohner, who is Ellery Studios' infographic editor. He has a background in design, visual journalism, and map making, and he led the design team for this second edition. I have prepared a few questions for our author panel, but I also invite you to post any questions you might have into the chat. There will be a Q&A session right after the first set of questions, and we can dive into anything you want to know from our authors. So to start off, I have a question for Markus. What is so special about this book?
Yeah, thank you, Bernd. And well, allow me to say a few words about how this idea of sun, wind, and wires was born. It actually goes back to the year 2017, when Bernd and I were sitting together at a nice dinner and talking about how we perceive energy and energy transition. And our impression was that energy often comes across a bit heavy, as an industry that threatens the climate, or as engineering systems that appear a bit nerdy. And we basically said we want to change that narrative. We want to tell a different story about energy and energy transition. A story that conveys the passion of those energy professionals who keep the lights on 24/7. Maybe a story of those who are applying all their creativity to move and transition towards 100% renewables in our grids. And definitely a story that shares the excitement and the potential that lies in such a transition. So when we continued the conversation and talked about how we could do that, we remembered a wonderful series of books that we loved reading in our youth. It's the Was ist was in German, or the American predecessor, How and Why. These are infographic books, which are typically about topics like ancient cultures or wild animals or astronomy. So we basically decided to make a How and Why book for adults, something like the moon landing moment of the energy transition. And with that idea in mind, we teamed up with a great group of energy experts together with infographic artists and started working on that book, by the way, just before Corona kicked in. So we just had that initial moment of sitting together, you know, before we had to go back into our social distancing and work on the details on our own. So we created a book, which then finally was launched in 2021 for the first time, which basically consists of two main sections. And in the first section of the book, we are trying to describe the status quo of our electricity supply system as it works and as it is nowadays. And to do so, we created a framework, which we're actually a little bit proud of, because it's brand new and it has first been published in this book, first time in literature ever, the so-called actor layer model. And I'm going to try and share my screen with you to give you just a rough impression of what that is. So I hope my screen can be seen now. So what we did was we tried and map down the key actors, or the key stakeholders, the key persons in the energy system. It's first of all the generation of electricity on the left-hand side, it's the consumption on the right-hand side, and in between there are certain actors such as TSO, transmission system operator, or DSO, who play an instrumental role in making that electricity system happen. So now we said, okay, next step is, how do they interact? And once you start thinking about it, there are different levels of interaction. The first one is what we call the physics level. That's really the question of how does electricity flow from a power plant to the consumer. But there's another level as well, and that's on the next page. I just flipped to the next page. The actors are still in their places, but there are different arrows in between them. This is now the market level, and that asks the question about how do we trade electricity? What are the commercial relationships behind that energy system? Then there's a third level, which we call data. Again, different kind of arrows in between the same actors. And that asks the question of what information needs to be interchanged to make that system possible. Some are talking about smart grids. And then finally, the fourth level is rules of the game, and that's about regulation. And that's the question of, you know, what are the laws, what are the regulations that underlie and that basically frame our energy system. And along this actor layer model, we then start digging deeper into certain aspects which are described in so-called zoom-ins, where we are talking about what is the copper plate, what is a merit order, what is frequency, what are elements of acids that that enable that system, and many others more. So that all together, nicely illustrated, is the first part of the book describing the system as it is. And then the second part of the book is really looking into the future and using some examples from the Windnode project to illustrate how a system integration of renewable of 100% renewables could look like in the future. I would like to, Andreas, maybe invite you to to say a few words about the infographic side.
Gladly. Marcus just eloquently described how the framework was built. What followed was almost as important, is giving it a form. Everything in the book is designed to communicate, but also to catch your eye when you're flipping through it. Now, for the content part, we very closely worked together with the authors. I had the privilege and much fun working together with Marcus on some of the new infographics in this new issue. And that's really like the ideal design process for an infographic shop, if you have access to the person who has already deeply thought about all these things. So that was really the perfect situation there. And well, I can say that because I wasn't involved in the first design of the book. There was the genius decision to also create an appealing book, which is fun to read. That's not just something you do just to have a nice thing, but it also helps to give it like an appeal to just pick it up and browse through, not only if you need the information or if you want to read it, but just because it's there laying on a book table or next to your computer. And the infographics, while browsing through, also help as an kind of an additional entry point. When you flip through the book, you might find something that looks interesting and it catches your eye, and then you read what's the article about, for instance. They try to communicate in the same way as the language of the book does, always accessible and taking the readers seriously. That's what we try to achieve. And also, of course, keep up as we did the second edition.
Thank you. Andreas, can you illustrate with an example how such an infographic is created collaboratively between experts and infographic designers?
I might. Aston, if you can put up the substation infographic, that's page 33, I think. There's an example of an infographic we did for this book for the second edition, where, as I just mentioned, Marcus and I worked together very closely. As with many projects, I didn't know the first thing about transformer substations when I started. So I went and gathered information. I asked Marcus a lot. I did technical and visual research to find out what it looks like, what it appears like, let's say, in the wild, and basically try to understand how this thing works and what the essential parts are. So I try to really gather as much information as I can. That's like the first point of interaction, connection with the author in this case. Then I try to put myself into the shoes of a person who might read the book. What do they know? What don't they necessarily know? What's happening on the surrounding pages? Something might help, something might disturb the reading. And with that person in mind, I jot down some ideas on how to represent information in an accessible graphic that benefits the reader. Hence the two layers. You see that the upper part shows a representation that resembles a circuit diagram. And the lower part, which is a little smaller, shows the elements of the substation in a way illustrated as you might see them from the street when you're passing in a car or walking by. I run that structure sketch by Marcus, and we discuss what I got right, what I didn't, what may be missing, and what can go. So that's like the second step of collaboration, connection with the author in this case. And then we go into refining. In this case, we had a pretty elaborate set of visual elements from the first edition designed by our colleagues from Ellery Studio. And I transfer the information structure we both worked together on and the necessary elements into that look that was already there in this case, and find ways to represent the crucial information, a kind of a story inside the infographic. In this case, this is how switches connect and disconnect the transformers with the landlines, and which way the current follows. That's in this case a copper line you see through the wires. I don't know if it's visible at the moment. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Aston. However, you might see it much better in your copy of Sun, Wind and Wires. So I recently described this as a dialogue. Marcus and I worked very closely, and we kind of went back and forth a lot. And that really helps for me to get the knowledge I need to represent what we want to tell and what we want to show. And I can also always ask more questions and iterate while we are working, and then also make maybe adjustments, like taking things out that would not be helpful, to make an infographic that still is accessible, because readers are always the main focus of the whole operation. That
you
helped.
mentioned, great, thank you. You mentioned the readers of the operation. Maybe I pass that on as a question directly to Ingo. Can you tell us, who is this book for? What kind of audience is this book for?
Yeah, thank you, Bernd. Anyone who is interested in the energy system and energy transition without having to be an expert. A guiding principle of the book is that it maintains a high scientific level, but at the same time, it should remain accessible, or in other words, it should not exclude anyone. And so the book is aimed at an interested public, young professionals, pupils, students, and not to forget anyone who appreciate its well-made infographics is also in the right place with this book. It stands for outstanding first-hand expertise, comprehensibility, and aesthetic appeal. At its best, it is leisure reading in the clothes of a specialist books. One observation regarding the first edition remains to be added. Within the industry, StromNetzFluss, or Sun, Wind and Wires, has already become more or less official onboarding reading in some companies, and including its infographics, it is also readily used in many lectures. It means in university or academic context or teaching. But the book also stimulates interdisciplinary discourse. I use it in my seminars at the TU Berlin, for example, here in collaboration with 50 Hertz. The focus here is on cultural studies perspectives on the energy transition, and StromNetzFluss, or Sun, Wind and Wires, is a piece of, in my opinion, it's a piece of successful interdisciplinarity. I think that's exactly what the book says and what makes it so appealing. The people who were involved in it have understood their own fields of knowledge as open spaces, were engaged in this tentative experimental work with each other. This work, for which there are hardly any methods or rules, and for which you simply have to get moving outside the box, outside the silo. Yeah, thank you, Bernd.
Thanks, Ingo. Stephanie, I have a question for you. Now that the book is also available in English, how did it come about, and for whom did we write it that way?
Yes, thanks a lot, Bernd. I actually joined the first German book launch and thought, oh, this is great. We've been waiting for something exactly like this, a book about energy and grids that is made with so much passion and attention to detail and depth of information. So after the launch, I got in touch with the authors, many of whom you see here, and designers, and said, oh, this is great. Have you ever thought about publishing this in English as well? And the immediate answer was, yes, actually, we would love to do that. So we started talking more and more, and over many calls and individual working sessions, came closer and closer to the English version becoming a reality. So I'm very, very happy that we can share it with all of you today. And it's amazing that that it's now here, because I hope that it will be a valuable asset in my working context as well. As you heard from Bernd earlier, I work at the Renewables Grid Initiative, or short RGI, and part of what we do at RGI is to try and make the need for new energy infrastructure in the context of the energy transition as understandable as possible. We have a membership of European transmission system operators and environmental and climate NGOs, and especially our TSL members always tell us how difficult it can be to explain the need for a new line, a specific grid project, to those who might be affected by it. And when trying to explain how the energy system functions and why a specific timeline might be needed, it's always difficult to find exactly the right language and the right level of depth. And of course, having beautiful and highly informative and highly understandable infographics is a cherry on top of that. And it's so needed to bring this type of information across in a way that really leads to deep understanding. Our observation is that there's actually a gaping hole in most school curriculums when it comes to energy education. And of course, one book cannot fill this gap, but it's a very good start, I find. And yeah, our hope is really that it reaches those people who are looking for easy access to energy information and an understanding just of how electricity flows from A to B. And you heard this already quite a bit today, but yeah, sun, wind, and wires like really explains broad concepts and ideas and how they interrelate, and in my opinion, beautifully. And often explaining something like this is actually really, really complicated. So the book breaks the complicated concepts down, and it uses, as you may know, Germany as an example to show how these complex concepts are being implemented, and yeah, thereby making often very abstract ideas much more tangible for many of us. Very obviously, Germany was picked as the example because the first edition was written in German and was created in a German context. But since the underlying concepts are the same almost everywhere, the content of the book is actually very easily transferable to other countries and contexts. So in this context, it made a lot of sense to think about an English version. And there might, of course, be slight differences, like in an example that I would like to show you. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Where do I have it here? Okay, you should now see on screen the an example page from the book that shows our transmission pylons page, or one of the pages that deals with transmission pylons. And the example that you see here is one of the most ubiquitous pylons that you would come across in Germany. In another area in Europe, they might look, or in the world, actually, it's not European, I think it could have global appeal, actually, this English version. So somewhere else, they might look slightly different, but the major components will still be the same, and the learning will still be there. Or when you look at a different example, 1 second. Here, so what you see here, what you see here is our grid congestion management page. So you see here that the German grid network is here as an example, but the whole process of how grid congestion is managed, which you see on the lower left box, is actually the same everywhere. So even though there are always very specific examples of the German context picked out in the book and looked into deeper, it still works to understand the energy system as a whole, no matter where you are. Yeah, and in addition, you've also heard this from Markus earlier, Sun, Wind and Wires features a lot of best practices on system flexibility, on sector coupling, digital approaches, and bringing society along. So everything that the Wind Node project worked on. And again, even though those are mostly anchored in Germany, they're just examples that hopefully inspire and show the range of possibilities we have to make the energy transition as successful as we can, whether we're inside or outside of Germany. So I'm very convinced actually that with the English version, this book will also work for international audiences. Yeah, so, and as Ingo said, we hope that it will reach everyone who wants to learn more about energy and grids, as well as anyone who wants to dive deeper into the German energy system specifically.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now, in addition to being available in English, let's take a look at what's new in the second edition. So I have a question for you, Victoria. You have revised the regulatory section. A lot has changed in the recent years. That's also why it was a good opportunity to revise the content. Can you briefly tell us where this is reflected in the book?
Thank you, Bernd. Yeah, as a lawyer, I had the pleasure of revising some of the regulatory chapters. And we are overall experiencing quite a regulatory transition at the moment, both on a national level and in the EU. And I think one of the most prominent examples of regulatory change reflected in the book is the abolition of the EEG surcharge, the EEG surcharge, EEG-Umlage. Yeah, this is especially visible when we take a look at our electricity bills. And in the book, we took a deep dive into how and why the EEG surcharge was dismissed and how renewable funding is functioning from now on, as well as we took a look at how renewable funding might be organized in the future without the EEG. Yeah, next to that, we are visiting quite some regulatory milestones that are not in the book, but were sort of anticipated. For example, there's a new section now in the Energy Act that is opening the pathway towards Nutzen statt Abschalten, utilization instead of curtailment, I think. And this will hopefully help ensure that flexibility will finally in the future pay off. And this development was already anticipated in the book because flexibility is one of the main focuses of the book in the second section. But coming back to the electricity bill, Bernd, if you would like to share the graph on page 70. Or Eston, I don't know who does the sharing, who's in charge.
What is the electricity bill? Oh, yes, no problem.
So yeah, this graph and this chapter itself helps us understand our electricity bills, and there we can see how the EEG surcharge coming from 2020 to 2022 was abolished, but how yeah, unfortunately the electricity price still went up, seeing as we've seen some extreme swings or even disruptions in the electricity market. And yeah, we show what this is all about and how these price structures change for each and every one of us.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, I have another question for you. Now, even with a view to the European context, the scope of the book has expanded. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure. Exactly, Ben. It has expanded, and we now have a European chapter as well. In it, we look at network development planning on a European level, and all the institutions, rules, and other factors involved in this. So it's quite similar in this sense to the actor layer model that Marco showed you at the beginning. It's definitely not as intricate as has been done for Germany. But it sort of is an answer to the question, how does the playing field change and how do the rules change when we zoom out of Germany? In this context, we're also looking at the structure of grid operation in Europe and European energy policy. And to show you a bit more of what the chapter looks like, I've brought you the two main infographics that we have in this chapter. And let me start with this one. For example, here you can see that there's quite a bit of European influence with regard to any EU member states' grid planning. This is based on the aim to build a stable network for all Europeans, but also to not build more than we collectively need to. So it's actually how on a European level do different institutions exchange on grid planning, and what are different rules that play into this. And you can see, for example, that there is a process via which the EU selects so-called projects of common or mutual interest on a regular basis to accelerate and support those grid connections that are collectively most needed. On the second graphic, here you see a map of Europe, and you see some of the biggest differences in grid operation across Europe. So we thought this was also important to highlight what is actually different from what we describe for Germany in this book. So for example, Germany is the only EU country with more than one TSO. You heard it earlier today that in Germany we have 4 TSOs, 4 transmission system operators. And you can also see here by the different coloration of the country that about half of the EU member states have one main distribution system operator. So these are the lower level grids. So one main DSO that caters to the majority of the country's population. And on the other hand, only 4 countries, so Germany, Austria, Belgium, and Sweden, have a dominant share of small local DSOs, with Germany actually being the one that has by far the largest number in the EU and easily exceeds 800, and all the other countries are somewhere in between. There are other aspects that are highlighted in this infographic with regard to this and in the European chapter overall. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a small taste of the type of information that you can find in our new European pages.
Thank you, Stephanie. Markus, what else is new in the book in the second edition?
Yeah, a couple of things, but maybe it's worth also highlighting the things which aren't new. And one of them is the great commitment of all those people who contributed. And I would really like to take that opportunity to thank the institutions and the individuals who made this possible. And, you know, given that this is really a pro bono project, none of us makes any money with that, right? All the authors, everybody contributed absolutely free of charge. This, by the way, is also the reason why we are making this book available for free download for everybody in German and English, because it's really the passion of those who contributed to share their, you know, insights and their commitment to the energy transition. And, you know, given that the WindNode project is over, which provided sort of an umbrella under which we could work on the first edition, I was really impressed that we even gained new authors who were willing to contribute to this second edition. We gained new institutions who supported us. So really great thank you to everybody who made that possible. Now, we went into this second edition with the clear idea of keeping the edits and the changes to an absolute minimum. But once you're starting on that, you find out that it's more than just updating some facts and figures, and it's more than translating it. Well, by the way, translating such a book is a great effort, and I'm really profoundly thankful to Kate Miller, who did a wonderful, outstanding job in translating this book, which also I feel really contributes to that overall perception of quality and aesthetics in this book, because also the language isn't just some DeepL translation or so, but you can really, if you take the English edition, you can really feel that a native speaker put lots of creativity and lots of linguistic feeling into that to really make it a great piece of linguistic art as well. So besides these facts of updating and translating it, and regulation, as Victoria pointed out, was obviously a big thing. There was almost like a Zeitenwende, a new era also in regulation over the last 2 years. I just want to point out 1 or 2 further examples. One of those is hydrogen, because most of you are probably aware that the hydrogen industry is booming as one of the elements of integrating volatile renewables into our energy system. So this is certainly one of the exciting updates that we try to shed some light on what's happening in the hydrogen industry. I just want to share one infographic with you, which really I love a lot because I haven't seen anything similar anywhere else. It's this page. So this is really a visual which is trying to give readers a feeling of what the units of measurement in hydrogen actually mean. Because those of us who have been active in the industry for a while, we do have a feeling about basic units like kilowatt or kilowatt hour. What does that mean? What can you do with 1 kilowatt hour? By the way, there are nice visuals in this book which also make that tangible. What is 1 kilowatt hour? But while there are people who do have that feeling of what is 1 kilowatt hour, most people are absolutely lacking any sense, any feeling of what is 1 kilogram of hydrogen. What does it mean to operate a 100 megawatt electrolyzer on the grid? And that's really what we try to illustrate in this visual here. I won't go into the details, but just some fun facts that you can learn if you dive deeper and discover this infographic. By the way, in the 50 hertz grid area alone, we are currently looking at grid applications of 10 gigawatt of electrolyzers by the end of this decade. 10 gigawatt is 10,000 megawatts, so 100 times the 100 megawatts we are seeing here. So we try to illustrate what is 100 megawatt. What does it mean to operate a 100 megawatt electrolyzer? Which inputs, which outputs? And one of the fun facts that I really remembered is here this little number 32. So it takes 32 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and the content of these pools, the water of these 32 pools, is chemically split up into hydrogen and oxygen over the course of 1 year. And on the output side, that leads to around about 9,000 tons of hydrogen, which is 0.2% of what we anticipate as an overall need in Germany in the year 2037. So quite impressive quite impressive orders of magnitude. Another aspect that I wanted to point out is the idea of flexibility. And Victoria mentioned that earlier. Flexibility is one of the key concepts of integrating renewables into our system. By the way, was the focus of the WindNode project and is one of the guiding thoughts in the second part of the book. And I just wanted to share one or two visuals with you. One is the very nice ENERTRAG example of what could be done with, so to speak, excess electricity, which normally would be curtailed, where ENERTRAG developed a very nice approach to utilize that otherwise curtailed energy to heat up a village, basically in a local heating system. And another example is from the Berlin water utilities. Here, that's also a visual that I like a lot. Sorry, it's this one here in the corner, if you can see it. That's a sewage treatment plant. And what the readers learn in this chapter about flexibility is how you know, a more flexible way of operating the sewage treatment can contribute to better reacting to the availability of wind and solar power. So I'll leave it with that. I could give you much more examples, but the short version is simply download the book and enjoy all these infographics.
Thank you, Markus. So we all know the saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And yet this book stands out with a very distinctive title and an unconventional name for an academic book. So what is the story behind that, Ingo? You're muted still?
Sorry. So yeah, the cover of a book is the first and most visible opportunity to do something different, I would say. It's about clearly communicating that this book tells a different story about energy and transformation. It's about showing that we understand that this technological shift should be ready for an experiment with new aesthetic and linguistic formats. To put it more briefly, how can we tell the energy transition differently, give it different and maybe hopefully better images? And the cover gives us this opportunity. Incidentally, in terms of design history, our geometric forms are based on the Bauhaus environment. A little tip: if you like, you can Google the industrial designer and architect Peter Behrens and his work for AEG, for the Allgemeine Elektrizitätsgesellschaft, if you want. On the level of design, we are thus bringing two open, forward-looking and innovative times into a resonance. And the title is very similar. The German title, StromNetzFluss, was borrowed from the children's game Stadt, Land, Fluss, a game that everyone knows and probably associates with an effortless and playful emotion. And the idea behind the German title was to transfer this playful meaning to science communication. With the English version, Sun, Wind, and Wires, we are no longer playing this game, but now we are very precise in terms of contents and physics, insofar as we focus on the transition from the natural energies of sun and wind to a technical infrastructure that means wires. And the playful element can now be found more in the language, in the poetic triad of the words sun, wind, and wires, and the alliteration of wind and wire. So here too, we have considered the linguistic communicative level of technical innovations very carefully, which over weeks of discussions and a long exchange of positions. And such a literary multi-layered title is, of course, also a promise of the text and of the essays that the book has between its covers. An appealing promise, I hope so, an appealing promise that this book will not only reach out to engineers, economists, or lawyers. So that's the point. Thank you, Bernd.
Thanks, Ingo. So at the end now, very briefly, and please each of you just in a short statement, in maybe just one sentence, what do you wish to achieve with this book? What are your goals for this second edition? Stephanie, maybe you want to start.
Yes, I can go first. So my hope is that we create a better understanding across Europe of what the energy transition means, what it means in practice, and how complicated it can be to implement, but also some excitement about being part of it.
Thank you. Markus.
Sorry, I think it works now. So I simply want to share with you the very first page of the book, because I think it really expresses what I like to achieve. And it's here, and I'll read it to you. It says, dedicated to our children, our grandchildren, and all the children of the world, to whom we owe a transition to a climate-neutral energy supply. And I would really love us to make a contribution to this enormously important goal. And by the way, I would also love to greet Georg Erdmann, who joined this session. Georg wasn't only my academic teacher, but also a great source of inspiration and one of the co-editors of this book. So thank you so much, Georg, for everything that you contributed.
Thank you. Victoria, what would you say?
Okay, I'll try to make it very short. I just hope that this book will help create many more energy enthusiasts like myself, because I think that's what it's capable of, and I hope that is what it will achieve.
Lovely, thank you. Andreas, what is your idea? You're muted.
Thank you. I already achieved what I wanted. I wanted to help make this book become a reality for all the reasons that were just mentioned. And I'm honored to be part of it.
And last but not least, Ingo.
Very short, I hope it will contribute to the self-confidence and courage of the energy transition.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Could I also say something? What should be the aim of this book?
Absolutely.
For me, the aim of the book is that we start, or the population, that means not the experts or the lawyers and the other, as Ulrich Ingo mentioned, but the educated people start to understand what does it mean, energy transition in the field of electricity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Georg. So do we have any questions from the audience? Now is the time to ask them.
When can we get a French version?
Well, Jan, be careful what you wish for. You might be held responsible to make the translation into French.
Oh, ça sera difficile, en fait. Merci beaucoup.
You want to have a chapter of nuclear energy?
Yes.
Annika wants to help with the French translation. So Annika and Jan, you can team up.
Yeah, we got this, Jan. Piece of cake.
All right. Let's have a croissant and a coffee tomorrow.
Ooh, yes, please.
You know, every time you finish a book, at least that's my feeling, you make that promise to yourself and also to your family, who get even less of your time during the weekends and evenings. You make that promise of never again. But then again, after a while, you start thinking about the next steps, and so let's see. But so while you are thinking about further questions, I also have a question to the audience. And Bernd, I would just say we give a free copy of a book to the first person who can post here an explanation in the chat about the color scheme of that book. So what is that color and why did we choose it? And the first person who types the right answer into the chat can choose to either get a German or an English hard copy. But I see another hand raised.
It's already answered. I mean, it's copper, sure, but it was answered already. But my question is very basic. Is it does it ship the second edition before Christmas? Because I want to make it as a gift to my father.
Who wants to answer?
Maybe I can answer that because I overheard today. If you're able to order today or tomorrow, that's not a problem.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I like your work. Thank you very much. It's great work.
Thank you. So Bernd, you have to figure out who wrote the right answer first. And if you want to give away one or two books, I'll leave that to you.
Yes, very much so. Yes, of course, it was indeed the copper plate, obviously. It conducts best, it's very well connected. And as you can also see, AEG back then had the same idea. And at the time when we developed the book, it was also a nice coincidence that one of the color producers, the big ones, brought out a new set of metallic shades, of metallic special colors. And we right away took them up on that and used it for this book.
And I mean, holding this book in your hands is really, it's really a special experience, because it is a difference. Just looking at it at a screen of really having this, copper color. And Ben, I think this is one out of many examples where this new approach really paid off, of having energy professionals and infographic artists working hand in hand. Because this isn't a book which was simply written by academics and then afterwards being illustrated by someone who knows a little bit about PowerPoint or so. But this was really a co-creation, and I think you can feel that in many aspects, and this color scheme is one of those, because, you know, we as energy professionals kept talking about the copper plate concept, which is, many of you will know, is one of the basic design concepts of our energy market in Germany. And then at some point, Bernd said, hey, wait a second, copper plate, there is this new Pantone color. So why don't we make this whole book shine in copper plate? Wonderful.
That also means Annika will get one of the first copies now.
I'm sorry, y'all. I couldn't hold back. I get very excited when there's a competition.
And I mean, Jan, by the way, he got already one because he visited me for lunch. So we can skip Jan, and then there's Isabel. So maybe you want to send one to Annika and one to Isabel.
Very happy to do so. Isabel, if you could send me your address in a direct message, then we can take care.
Thank you. That will be great. In Spain, we also want, I mean, for the third edition, maybe in Spanish, because I'm not an engineer in a world of engineers, so I can't wait to start. I already download the PDF, so I will not wait for my copy to read it.
Big applause. Thank you very much. I have to leave in this very second. So fantastic. I hope to see you all very soon again.
Thank you, everyone. I have to leave as well. Bye-bye.
So unless we have a final question from anyone else, Bernd, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. It's also the timing that we estimated. So as we draw the curtains now on this virtual panel discussion, I also want to say thank you to our panelists / authors for sharing their experiences with this book and their vision for it. We hope the release of this second edition contributes towards fostering a global dialogue on the pressing issues we face, on bringing the energy transition forward, making it more accessible for people who do not have the professional background and the professional need to expose themselves to this content, and therefore through this book can gain suitable knowledge to join the discourse. And therefore, we also encourage you to continue the conversation, share your thoughts, and explore the wealth of knowledge within the pages of this publication. And thank you all for being part of this momentous occasion. And we look forward to continued collaboration and progress in the exciting journey ahead. So thank you, everybody, very much for joining us today, and have a nice evening.
Congratulations. Woo! Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Have a lovely evening,
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.